Call meeting to order. Everybody, thank you for coming and welcome to the Government Services Committee meeting. And it's time for the roll call.
Ms. Vedder.
Present.
Mr. Steingart.
Here.
Mr. Ruiz.
Here.
Mrs. Edwards.
Here.
Mr. Sorensen. Okay, and then Monica behind you.
And Monica's going to give us a little
Oh,
presentation.
no, Monica.
Sorensen.
Brought to you by the CPR station.
This is a public.
Now we can repeat it.
Okay, everybody. Why am I here?
Public service announcement
Yes,
from
this is a
Monica.
public service announcement for the employees, the department heads, commissioners of Sullivan County. It is our annual open enrollment, and email was sent out to commissioners and department heads to help distribute to their staff about requesting option forms. We need to make sure that everybody tells the people that work with us that if you need to change your benefits for whatever level, you need to request an option form. It's 1 page. It needs to be completed and sent back to risk management prior to November 22nd. That's what lets anybody change their benefits. I've done public service announcements all day today. So I'm hoping that everybody helps us get the word out to their staff, the people that work for them, the people that call my office and say, nobody sent me anything. So if you could post it in on your bulletin boards or print out a couple, keep it out on a general place, and just, if you have a department head meeting, just tell everybody, if you need to change your benefits, it's open enrollment time. And anybody have any questions about that? No, you shouldn't. It's been lovely chatting.
This is just a test. If it was a real emergency, you would have told us.
That's correct. Next time, I think I'll do different outfits.
That's a good idea.
Every time that I come in. So I appreciate your patience.
Okay, and Jonathan, maybe you want to come up to the table and join us here?
Oh, no, just
He's trying to hide. He's trying to hide.
Josh, I'm sorry. All right, so it's time for Kathy and purchasing.
Okay, I'm not handing out bid summary sheets this week. The first bid was ice control materials, snowplow blades and cutting edges for DPW, and roll-off containers for our recycling program.
Board of Elections isn't here.
Board of Elections had sent me an email telling me that they couldn't be here because they're totaling up their absentee ballots, so that's the reason why they're not here. Which then tells us that Cornell Cooperative Extension will give us an update.
Okay. I'm Nicole Sullivan, your member man representing Cooperative Extension. We've had a good month. We first and foremost want to thank you, the Legislature, as an entity for voting, approving our building transfer, title transfer. Thank you very much for that, from the bottom of our hearts. And, we're still working on the shared position, ag position. We're excited about that. We're down to 3 very special candidates for both the government and CCE. So that'll be a really cool opportunity for us to work a little more closely with you and also get a real highly trained professional in that spot where we need it in areas of agriculture. We did have a very successful event in October from Our Kitchen to Your Market, and it was sold out. It was a value-added program. We had all kinds of entrepreneurs and small businesses, people who are just starting out, had no idea about it, and we also had people coming in that have already been doing it and want to do more. So it was a good opportunity. We're getting the Cornell University Food Venture Center more involved with us in our endeavors for our commercial kitchen, and we had Herb Cooley from there representing at that workshop, which was an honor. We also had Marianne Johnson and some other really important people. So that's a little bit about that. We had an Ag Awareness Day. We partnered with BOCES, Sullivan County BOCES, and Barbara and Ed Moran from Stonewall Farms. We had it at that farm in Jeffersonville. They also work for BOCES. It's a great partnership, and that was very successful at over 250 people and about 15 vendors, I believe. Lots of people were at that event learning about agriculture and businesses as well. So that was really good. We're working a little bit more closely with BOCES going forward. We're really excited about that. On our hoop house, and some other educational opportunities, like they're doing some hydroponic stuff over there, and we took a little tour recently. It's really exciting. So trail work, things like that. And of course, Greg's still involved in the red meat facility, just getting an operator in place, things like that on the committee. So he's still involved in that. And other than, so that's basically Greg's report. But we have some other exciting things going on, going forward. We're training master gardeners again, another group of 20 people that will be in that slot, volunteering for Sullivan County. They have to put so many hours in for that. And you know, next month's report's going to be exciting too. We're doing a lot of 4-H work in November, so that's also good. I was told to keep it brief, so that I can go.
Brief is good.
So, are there
Can I
any
ask a
questions
question?
for me? Yes.
The parts 2 and 3 from the kitchen to market, the small business development and value added products, do you have dates for those next 2 sessions?
No, I don't, but I need them too, so
Okay.
I brought a notebook for
Because
questions.
the more advanced notice that we have, the more we can tell people in our constituencies about
Yep.
it. I know that a lot of people who took it, they said they'd never be able to get all that information on their own. It was so well packaged and was really helpful. How many participants did you say you had?
It had to be, we had around 30 people in the room, but I know there were more that were just involved, not necessarily attending,
Okay.
but over 30.
Yeah, so the more advanced notice we have that we can let people in our patch know.
Great.
The
I have my list.
and
Okay, cool, yeah. And, any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you so
And
much.
the clerk's not here.
I don't see the county clerk, so I have to assume there's no monthly report from the county
College
clerk.
is here.
And the college.
Yes. Dr. Hilgerson couldn't be here today because she's out on the road working on what I'm going to briefly share with you. My name is Sarah Thompson-Tweedy. I'm the Dean of Student Development Services at SUNY Sullivan, and I serve on the executive management team. And I drew the short end of the stick and was told to come here.
Welcome to our little world.
you can tell her that we're very nice.
So I think that probably many of you in the room know about that the college continues to move forward with an ambitious proposal that we're calling the SUNY Sullivan 2020 proposal, which is to build an institute that will serve as a hub for research and development on the campus at SUNY Sullivan. And we're going to aggressively pursue funding for that from a variety of different sources, as well as seeking partners to ensure that that initiative goes well. And just that we continue to move forward, and this project will tie also into Startup New York. So that was what she wished for me to share with each of you, and I can maybe entertain some questions. if you have any.
I'm hoping that you're working together with Cooperative Extension on a number of these.
Absolutely, they are on our list.
Great.
She just left. So, yes.
Yes, because I thought Dr. Hillesy said that she was working with.
Yeah, I was quite excited to do that too. We
Terrific.
also contacted Cornell Water Resources Institute as part of this too, so.
Wonderful.
Further the reach.
Great.
Can I just also, if you can report back that I had been talking with Dr. Hilgerson about the consolidated funding application rounds with regards to, the kind of a hospitality and, hotel industry training and curriculum. So the grant cycles for the Empire State Development are generally July, August is when the proposals come due. So rather than only having 6 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 weeks of notice, you know, and then having to scramble and put something together, that really now is the time to really be looking at the kind of curriculum that's gonna make Sullivan County a magnet for what we anticipate to be a revitalized hospitality, hotel, resort destination industry. I had seen, a couple of years back, there was only one person that had designated their major in tourism. So we were looking at how can we actually make that a desirable thing. As far as I know, you know, there's nothing quite like it in Pennsylvania or New Jersey or any of these places that have casinos. Where do the people who have to do the training, where do they go? So
Okay.
rather than this constant
Sourcing,
outflow,
yeah.
make it a magnet, make it a hub, so that other people from other states are actually coming to Sullivan County to do the training, as well as giving more career opportunities for people who want to have a career in Sullivan County.
You got it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Resolutions.
Thank you. It's time to move on to the resolutions. The first resolution is to award and execute a contract of various vendors for the lawn mowing services. Thank you. Second? Okay, is there any discussion on this? I just want to state that the reason why we're doing lawn services now is because they need to,
Schedule their work for the coming year. So we like to know ahead of time that we're in the mix.
okay? All in favor? Thank you.
5-0.
Okay, and the next one is to authorize and award the execution of a contract with SJB Services, Inc. for soil borings testing for County Bridge number 359 and 111.
12.
12.
112, sorry.
Moved by Jonathan, seconded by Alan.
Before it snows, yes.
Where are those bridges?
Rockland and California.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding this resolution? Any further discussion? Then it's time to call the vote. All in favor?
5-0.
Thank you. Okay, the last one is to authorize and award an execution of a contract with Skyline Drive for analyzing the 2010 census data and developing a redistricting plan.
Alan.
And
Sec-
seconded by,
Jonathan.
thank you. Is there any discussion on this item?
Is there a time frame on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we asked that the report, and recommendation be done by June of, 2014.
And you've met already, right, your team?
Our team has met, we received 2 proposals to the RFP. One was from an out-of-state contractor that had very little experience in Sullivan County. And, this particular, vendor, is from Schenectady, New York, and has done quite a few redistricting plans for various counties and other, municipalities in New York State.
They're not the ones that did it the last time.
They are not the ones that did it the last time.
And this is just to clarify, this is something that has to be done because of the change in populations in the present districts, the way they stand. Okay, is there any other questions regarding this or discussion? Well, then it's time to call that question. All in favor?
5-0.
Thank you. Now, I'm very glad to bring a presentation here to this Government Services Committee meeting regarding broadband. I want to introduce you to Frank Yoder. Frank is here. He's in Pennsylvania. He's worked as the Broadband Services Manager and worked with the Pennsylvania State Police. What Frank is going to be doing is going to be explaining how we can perhaps bring broadband to our entire county so that we wouldn't have areas that wouldn't have broadband available. So Frank, if you could come up here, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Kitty.
And I'll move over and
Trade
you
you
can
places.
go there. There
Trade
you
you
go.
places. So yes, my name is Frank, and believe it or not, State Police owns the broadband network for Pennsylvania, but I'll explain that little confusing thing in a minute. But thank you for having me. It's a beautiful 3.5 hour drive, except for Scranton. It's a beautiful 3.5 hour drive.
That's one way.
Wait, from Clearfield?
Little town west of Harrisburg.
It's almost near Clearfield.
More cows than, I was there last week, actually. Clearfield. So I want to explain how, and my goal is to explain how, what Sullivan County, what you folks are undertaking with your public safety radio network upgrade presents an opportunity, just like what Pennsylvania did with our statewide radio network. The opportunity is to utilize part of the infrastructure to bring broadband to residents, businesses, public safety, county government offices out in rural county. But the whole point is to bring, potentially, to bring broadband to the rural parts of the county, which is most of the county. Sorry, stating the obvious. 2 jokes and that's the quota.
You're hired.
Pennsylvania's statewide radio network started in 1996 and has, so your statewide network, which we'll talk about in a minute, 9 towers and microwave backhaul in between. Our network has 240 towers and 720 some roadside cells, which is a telephone pole with an antenna on it. Much greater magnitude, but again, the parallels are very similar, and that's what Kitty and Cora and others and I have been talking about for a couple weeks. And again, thank you for this opportunity to explain to a different audience what the opportunity can be. But before we get into that, it's not going to be overly technical, but I do need to explain and clarify some terms that just set a common understanding of the terms that we're going to, of the topic here. And the first term is broadband. Well, what is broadband? We've heard the term, it's used in marketing, it's used in advertisements, but what does it really mean? We need to put a number on it because, well, that's what you're really seeing. Your web page is really brought to you by way of a number. And so what is that speed? What is broadband and how do we define it? If you think back not too many years ago where we had dial-up modems, that was 56 kilobytes, 56,000 ones and zeros. So data is ones and zeros. That's what that picture of your grandchildren, that YouTube video, they're just ones and zeros. So how many are you receiving or transmitting in a second? Dial-up, 56,000. DSL really is less than a megabit. And if you have DSL, you'll probably know how slow that is.
Just for your information, I still have dial-up because there is no other service where I live.
I completely understand. There's thousands of Pennsylvanians just like you. Cable, there's a fair amount of cable in the county, but that too is not a foolproof source of broadband to residences because, well, it's not terribly fast, certainly does the job, but if you're at the end of the line, it's kind of like hot water in the house. You're the last one to get it. You got the slow end of the stick. So fiber, as the pinnacle of broadband to residences anyway, Fios was Verizon's commercial product. They're done deploying it. It's fiber optic, speed of light over a glass fiber right to your computer. We're talking 20 million ones and zeros per second. So great wide disparity in the technologies available to bring internet to your home. But okay, what common number can we at least agree upon? The FCC says 4 million. So 4 megabits, that'll be our, in your mind, think 4 megabits per second is the definition for broadband. And I will note that DSL providers are quick to advertise their product and tell you that they're bringing you broadband. The second and last term that I need to clarify is middle mile. And notice we have a middle mile network. And the analogy that I use, and it's very accurate, is the information superhighway. Think of that as Route 95. How do you get to your driveway? We call that the last mile. Well, some sort of intrastate road. So in terms of data, think of the internet as a superhighway. Think of the last mile as your driveway. How do you get between the two? Some sort of a middle mile. And that's the source of the lack of residential rural broadband in America. Affordable middle mile. So what Pennsylvania did, we said, all right, let's take our statewide radio network, 240 towers. And this dates back to 3 years ago, the federal era stimulus. It had a $4 billion nationwide rural broadband component. In Pennsylvania, quite admittedly, we didn't know what the end goal was, but we knew that, hey, we have resources, towers that we've already built, we've already invested in that had spare capacity in terms of it's a big piece of steel with a couple small antennas. What can we do with them? And what we did, we picked 71 of them, added more microwave dishes, more computers, more radios, more technology, and thereby built a middle mile for the admittedly very few internet service providers in rural PA, but they couldn't grow their businesses and help more people because you're looking at $1,500 to $2,000 a month for a connection to the internet. Well, if you only got 10 houses here and 20 houses there, you're not recouping that. Think of it as a raw material. They're simply taking that internet capacity and bringing it into rural America and reselling it. Well, it's a really expensive connection, so if they can't make any money doing it, even as a nonprofit, a small company in central Pennsylvania, $1,500, $2,000 a month is way too much money relative to the revenue they can get. So let's drill this down to Sullivan County and what you folks are doing. And this big clip is not proving as easy as it was in the office. So very similar to Pennsylvania, you're upgrading your public safety radio network. That comprises 9 towers. I believe you have 5, you're building 4, or 4 and 5. So ultimately 9 towers that will have spare physical capacity in terms of height or space on the tower to put antennas. Well, how can that translate into broadband for your citizens? I'm trying to draw the parallels here visually. Thanks for the coordinates. Oh, by the way, the network, the size of the pipe that you're building is exactly the same size as the pipe as we did in Pennsylvania with our middle mile, 150 megabits, so 150 million ones and zeros per second. And that's a really big deal. I mean, that's a lot of capacity for public safety radio and also the potential of broadband to citizens. So when we say microwave, I just want people to visually see what, next time they see a tower and see the cellular antennas, that these are the microwave. These are the, also known as the backbone, high volume, high capacity, backbone, the foundation for a radio network. And in fact, it's the same foundation as your cell phone. It's the exact same model that the cell carriers use. They use microwave or fiber optic to their towers, and yes, they will install, going back to this lack of middle mile, AT&T, Verizon, they will put in fiber. They will put in 20 miles of fiber just for their use right to their towers, and that's it. They're not in the business of splitting off some for your internet provider or your internet, they're in the business of running fiber for their cell towers. That's the reality. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's the reality. So, Pennsylvania, again, we said let's build our own middle mile network and see if that can't help to increase the supply, increase the availability, and lower the cost of middle mile data transport to encourage internet service providers to expand their business. And so that was the equation that we had, and that's what we built. Similarly, your 9 towers, 150 megabits. Okay, now what? keep going back to analogies and metaphors because they really do work to explain this complicated topic. Think of it as a pipe carrying data so this is the radio on the hip of a law enforcement or an ambulance or firefighter, the mobile radios in their vehicles and or fixed radios in their dispatch centers. We have, just a quick statistic, we have a little over 30,000 radios, fixed, mobile, and these portables in Pennsylvania. 30,000 radios across that entire statewide network. We've never, at any one peak moment, take your Shanksville, 9/11, take any number of natural disasters we've had, multiple agencies responding, PEMA and county, we haven't had over 13 megabits. So 13 out of the 150 used. It's not to say you won't use more, but in the big scheme of things, the amount of capacity that we built and you're building is plenty to do two purposes. I made up these numbers. The 50 is more accurate. I'm not going to speak for public safety, but I can, from 7 years of experience, say that rough numbers, 100 megabits, it's a really big pipe, and 50 megabits, that's big enough of a pipe for an internet service provider to, again, over the middle mile, think of this as a middle mile, making an internet connection, bringing it to any of these 9 towers. Now, so,
Frank, that was based on the tower
yes.
coordinates that Alex sent you?
Correct.
That, okay, thanks.
So the key to this is, the key to what you're building is that it could be a dual purpose network. There's plenty of capacity through the overall pipe, over the microwave that's being installed on the towers that are being built to drive the radios that you folks will carry. There's enough capacity in this whole system to do a second purpose, and that is to help an internet service provider bring internet to residences, to businesses and county government offices throughout your county. Okay? So this is a logical progression to the second main point I wanted to bring to you. So the first main point is be optimistic, be glad that you're building a system that has a dual purpose that can have a direct benefit to the economy of your county. The second point is that government is not in the business of bringing internet to a residence directly. That last mile, that's an internet service provider. In Pennsylvania anyway, Public Utility Commission said, or has in fact deemed in law that that last mile is a regulated, I don't know about a utility, but it's certainly regulated, published tariffs, etc. The middle mile, I call myself a dumb pipe. PUC doesn't care. You can move data from Pike County to across the state, they don't care. Because we're not working directly with the residents, with a citizen, with a consumer, excuse me. We are working with an internet service provider. And that takes us to this drawing here, that it's up to an internet service provider to determine if and how many citizens they can serve by way of a connection on any one of the 9 towers. And by the way, if it hasn't been clear, I apologize. We are strictly dealing with wireless communications, radios, the DSL, that's your copper phone lines, 56K, the cable, those are wires that are, no small internet service provider is going to run wires for 20 or 30 houses. So we're talking about wireless broadcast off of the towers, or any one of the towers. But the question now is up to an internet service provider, quite honestly, to come here and say, drive around, do GIS analysis, take pictures, and this is where I'm at literally in Pennsylvania right now, is working with an internet service provider here in Lock Haven, who is, in fact, they picked 17 towers in the eastern half of our network that are close enough to villages, hamlets, that they can pay for infrastructure, install it on the towers, and broadcast to enough houses to at least break even. And the second ISP we have is in the western half. They choose to do point-to-point connections for Marcellus gas pumping stations out in truly the middle of nowhere. But you know what? They're 13 miles away from one of our towers. This company chooses to work on these point-to-point, solving individual problems for individual businesses. Either model is fine. They are now extracting the value out of our network and realizing the ultimate purpose for it. Back to Sullivan County, that's, as I see it, that's where the intangible business component of this opportunity lies right now, is someone who has experience providing wireless internet in rural America to analyze the towers relative to the populations and see what can be done. But you have, this is my final, I guess you call these slides. Final metaphor to keep in mind. Going back to the highways, you are building a very capable highway for public safety use, fire, ambulance, law enforcement, and that's good. But there is spare capacity on this highway to use one of the lanes for your citizens, to bring broadband to their houses, to businesses, county offices, what have you. And I guess to conclude by saying in Pennsylvania, I mean, we just finished this network the beginning of September. We have 17 sites that were just finished construction 2 weeks ago. And they're literally today out knocking on doors in some hamlets here in Luzerne County and Wayne County. In Wayne County, for example, one of the towers is 3 miles away from a business park, Sterling Business Park, right off of Route 84. They weren't really able to market. They already built the roads and the fire hydrants, but they really weren't able to aggressively market it because there's no internet. Well, now we have a 20 megabit wireless connection going to a water tank that can see the whole business park. And effective immediately, they can go out and market now their business park with a whole new tack. And in Western Pennsylvania, we have nine different point-to-point connections that are absolutely benefiting a 5-star hotel in the middle of Cook Forest, 4 natural gas pumping stations, county government office up here, some local government offices. So in a matter of 2 or 3 months, we're already seeing significant value being realized out of our middle mile network. So I'm confident that you folks will as well. So thanks for this opportunity to explain the network that you're building and what it could do. Are there any questions?
If you could further explain, because I know Alex has been working very hard on the radio tower system, and from my understanding of what you had said earlier at some meetings, besides the fact that we're building it so much larger than we necessarily would ever use in our thinking, but God forbid a tsunami came through the Catskill Mountains and we had a lane that was ours, would you please explain how that lane would move?
Yes. Perfect. Just like, was that a dashed line? Segmented line on the highway. So the pipe analogy does work. The computers which make the whole network work, which direct the packets, so when you push to talk, it sends your call up to the officer that it's intended to. Okay, that's traversing through the red pipe. And your residential internet's traversing the gray pipe. Those aren't fixed pipes. The computers that make it all work are smart enough to, dial this back a little bit if there needs to be more traffic in the public safety lanes. So this is a key point to those that are involved with the design and the construction, is that microwave really in the design consideration needs to say, hey, and the majority of technologies, the microwave technologies out there do already do this, but it needs to be noted to them as you scope, develop your requirements for their scope, is to say, hey, we need to be able to segregate traffic across the network so that we can do civilian broadband as well as the public safety radio.
And prioritize.
Yes, inherent in that is the prioritization of the traffic.
I think that was the major question, is the priority.
Absolutely.
That if there were a major disaster, major situation, that the computers in the system can prioritize
Absolutely.
the emergency response to be first, before my use.
Not only the virtual pipes, but the actual priority of the traffic, absolutely correct. That was a key consideration for us as well, excuse me. Our traffic, should that, should the underlying radio network, for whatever reason, need more bandwidth, our computers will actually take away from the broadband middle mile and devote it to the radio network. So, public safety voice always has priority. Yes.
You know, obviously the speed of the end user is going to be based on the slowest part of the network, which obviously would be the last mile. What would the speed be for that last mile? Because it's wireless. Obviously it would be based on volume, I would assume, but what are you expecting to get in your system in that last mile?
Sure. Let me answer that relative to those 17 towers where we said, okay, there's enough population within 3, 5, 6 miles away from the tower. You have two conditions. There's some trees in between us, or there's no trees in between us. If there's earth in between us, the antenna and your rooftop, there is no connection. If there's some trees, 900 megahertz is the frequency that would be used to penetrate some trees near line of sight. You can actually go over a slight hill as well. But 900 megahertz, a connection from the tower to a residence using 900 megahertz going through some trees, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 megabits. Is it blazing fast? No, but it's a lot faster than DSL. If there are no trees and you have clear line of sight to the tower up on the hill, now you're talking 3.65, also known as WiMAX, or 5.8 gigahertz. So those two frequencies, now you're in the 10 megabit per second range. That's really fast and high quality. So it really comes down to the topography and the foliage in between your rooftop and the antenna. Which takes me back to this question here. And matter of fact, this tower, is that the one? I actually looked at a couple of them that were indeed overlooking a decent population. So I mean, it really comes down to an internet service provider, like I said, looking at how many houses are near line of sight or directly line of sight to the tower to determine the frequency, which will give you the speed.
That being said, then obviously the topography of Sullivan County is going to make it very difficult to get that high percentage of the population still. I guess I should be formed in a question, not a statement. But
I don't disagree with your statement,
yeah.
And those are in fact the challenges, and that's why there are very few, there are 3 wireless internet service providers north of Route 80. One of them is in State College, a lot of students in apartments, a very dense population or customer base. Lock Haven started off with the university and spread out to a couple of the suburbs around Lock Haven, but there aren't that many. And the one up in Ridgeway, similarly. So they're doing the best they can given the constraints of physics, really.
Well, to piggyback on that, there was a method to my madness when I mentioned Clearfield, because I know the topography of Clearfield.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're coming off a mountain, you're going over the railroad tracks into a hole. How's the service there? I'm just curious.
Probably very poor. How is the service there? Sometimes you're lucky to have cable or a relatively high-speed DSL line run by your house. There are, I don't know the number, but I'm certain it's in the thousands, because the internet service provider in Lock Haven has about 300 dial-up customers. So let's extrapolate. There's 300 dial-up customers in this region right here. Let's call that half of Clinton County. There's 32 counties. No, there is 64 times 3. There's 18,000. There's a lot of dial-up customers in Pennsylvania still. So it's a matter of doing, and very good question, sir, I appreciate it. It's a matter of doing the best that you can, given the topography and the
It's a step in
laws
the
of
right
physics.
direction, but it's not an end-all answer.
Correct.
Eric was next in questions
Yes,
from
thank
me
you.
watching hands,
Oh, thank you.
and then,
Clara.
What would you say is the average radius from the point of presence on these towers? Whatever solution you use, 900, 500, what's the max that an ISP would be willing to provide?
If it's a clear line of sight, I'm the tower, you're the house, 8 miles, 10 miles?
So
6
basically-
is the good rule of thumb.
So basically, for the 9 towers that we have, you take the compass and you draw an 8-mile radius, and that's gonna be the max. Pretty
There'll be opportunities down a valley that could perhaps, but
Because they took a look at most of the towers.
Yes.
And they're, where they are now, there's cable TV, there's Roadrunner. The exception is Grahamsville. Thunder Hill looks down on a lot of parts of Grahamsville that have no cable service. So that would be prime to cover that area.
And that's an interesting point, and I'm not going to speak for KCNet. I'm going to pass along anecdotally, hopefully accurately enough, that Keystone Community Network, excuse me, they're the ISP in Lock Haven. They, and I learned this over the last year, they are able to take away from cable a fair number of customers because they're, even though it's only 3 or 4 megabits, it's 3 or 4 megabits in both directions. Your cable might be 3 or 4 down, but a half up. So when you press send on that picture, you're waiting for it to go. With KCNet, it's fast in both directions, $35, $40 a month. So they're able to, even though there is cable, and in fact, very good point, a lot of these 17 sites have cable. And they're confident enough to be able to get enough customers, take them from the cable provider, or at least offer an alternative that is compelling. Yes, ma'am.
That just morphed into 2 questions for me. First is, you talked a lot about western Pennsylvania. What about Wayne and Pike counties in Pennsylvania? What is the network like? Because those are the ones that adjoin Sullivan County.
Yes.
And I see a back and forth across the river relationship. The second thing is, so now if there's a tower near me and I go wireless broadband and I go off cable, will the fact that many of us reduce our use of cable then eliminate cable service for people at the other end of the line? Say our township is very rural, and several of us, 100 of us, decide not to use cable any longer, and we're using this broadband. Will that reduce service provision
Right.
to the people who are on the?
A couple ways of answering that. So as a cable provider, they initially gave you the television before the internet was invented. So that came along first. That was the chicken. Then the egg, the golden egg for them really was the internet. That's a freebie on top of the copper wire, that their cable that's already there. So if you took away that golden egg, they're still going to sell you the television.
But not necessarily those people would not necessarily get internet.
That, no, separate purposes for the same cable. Television, some to your television, some of that data goes to your computer. If you took away the computer from them, they're still going to sell you the television. Secondly, they already have the infrastructure. They're not going to shut it off for customers. They've paid off that infrastructure investment long ago.
Ken?
So good question though.
So the first question though was about towers in, along the Delaware River.
You're 3 steps ahead. The 2 towers in Wayne County are line of sight from your 2 west, I forget which ones, but your westernmost tower. So perhaps something down the road, some interconnection between networks, the transport of internet from our towers to yours, there actually could be something down the road. But that's very far down the road.
And how does that, I'm sorry, but
No,
I'm
it's
kind
all
of
good.
really into this. How does that relate to, now this is state-owned, the state-owned tower system, or the.
Yes, correct.
right. But then there are other companies that are also putting in broadband towers, that I don't know, I assume that they're not state companies, so how do they
Correct.
relate to this picture?
You must read up on this subject.
A little bit.
They are building those towers not for a middle mile. How do I put this bluntly? They don't care about residences in rural PA or New York or anywhere else. Those towers are being built, and I'm familiar with 8 of them, which are traversing the state, high up on mountaintops, very valuable real estate. There is a dedicated network that is connecting Wall Street to Chicago. So I'm familiar with 8 towers being built across the northern tier for that specific purpose. And or AT&T, Verizon, Sprint for their backhaul. Just like we're talking about backhauling internet to a house or radios, they're backhauling your cell call, your cell phone call. Very rarely will you see a tower being built with microwave dishes for the benefit of a rural citizen. Matter of fact, I wager that you never will, because there's not enough of them to make it a profitable business.
And it's more profitable for them to build the tower rather than use your system.
Oh, you hit a sore nerve there. I had a meeting with Verizon 2 weeks ago, and I said earlier that they'll build 13 miles of fiber for their own towers. Don't get on the soapbox, don't get on the soapbox. Lock Haven, go 13 miles north, take a left in a very steep valley. It's a little town called Renovo. Very poor. Oh, but they're going to put, okay, here's the tone. They're going to build 2 towers. Now, they're legislated, they are mandated by law by 2015 to provide broadband to 100% of their customer base. Now, that's not the whole state. That's pockets of dial-up customers here and pockets of dial-up customers there. So how are they providing this broadband to 100% of their customers? Wirelessly, 4G. They're going to put in an LTE, a 4G distribution, which has about a 3-mile radius, that covers just enough of their customer base to, by the letter of the law, they're going to be able to provide broadband to their customer base. This starts at $50 a month. And when you go over your 5 gigabit limit, which is a handful of YouTube videos and a couple handfuls of emails, when you go over your 5 gigabit, you're now going to pay $10 for your next gigabit and $10 for the next. Now, I chose to cut off my Fios. I wanted a wireless connection I could take. I didn't want 2 bills. I chose to do $50 a month to start, and I'm paying $60 to $70 just for the data on this phone. Now, mind you, I can plug it into my PC, and it functions as a modem, and it works because I'm 3 miles away from a tower. But to say that this is the solution, and I should have mentioned that earlier, if anybody hears this being touted as the solution for rural broadband in America, it's not correct, because most rural residents can't afford or don't want to pay starting at $50 a month. KCNet, hundreds of customers since 1996, they have experience, and they've told me that $35 is about the hurdle rate, about the limit to what people will pay for broadband in rural Pennsylvania, rural central PA. So let's extrapolate that and say that $35, $45 is about the limit for a rural citizen. So when you're starting at 50 and has a limited footprint, oh, and by the way, those towers that are being built, it's 4G LTE data only. Are they going to put antennas on there to help our cell phone callers who are driving up Route 120? Nope.
Help our emergency response people?
No, because just cell phone, it's not going to help your reception going up Route 120 to get from Lock Haven to Renovo, which is already pitiful. So thankfully, they're asking to put these 6 towers on DCNR property. DCNR is now aware of the fact that it's data only to meet the letter of the law. They have the ability to say, you know, we're not being unreasonable to say that Route 120 really needs more cellular coverage. Would you consider doing that in addition to this data only? And again, they're running fiber, 13 miles of fiber up Route 120 to get to the tower that will transmit internet only to meet the letter of the law. So it's a complicated, really sticky, political, expensive landscape.
Is that a state law, Commonwealth law?
We did. We, in 2005, rewrote the Telecommunications Act, Chapter 30, which, yes, the legislature said, hey, we recognize there's a deficiency of broadband. You must put in broadband. Didn't say how. So they're going to run fiber to a tower, broadcast just enough of the expensive broadband to satisfy the letter of the law. So,
Ken was
sorry to be
next.
cynical, but that's the truth.
Ken?
I have a comment and a couple of questions. One is Thunder Hill has a tower that used to be a microwave, I don't know, still going or not, has a line of sight from here to Empire State Building. So there's a tower over there that's probably not being used or something that probably could be retrofitted to better what's there.
I think they took it down.
No, I think somebody uses
No.
it. Anyway, cell phone speed, well, I'm just curious what the 4G speed was. And the middle mile, I see you got it there with a black line. Is the middle mile a microwave or is it a hard wire type situation?
Microwave only, yep.
Okay, so that, and so nobody knows, yesterday, the family company Verizon was putting in Fallsburg and Loch Shelter Tower was putting in fiber to go from there, and they were running it up 50 towards Liberty. And could care less about anybody else along the way.
I'm not saying that's true, I'm saying it's possible.
Alan?
It's true.
Alan was
Oh,
next.
yeah. The cost of installing the microwaves to create the middle mile, was that something that went to the local service provider of the internet, or was that something the state paid for? I guess if we were to expand our Sullivan County system to have the broadband,
Right.
I'm just wondering what the cost.
Similar but different. This was indeed a separate project with separate antennas. So we started off with these two, and we started off with these for the basic radio network. So recall this radio network there. And then we said, hey, let's add these two to make a second network, totally separate network, okay? But what you're building, and sorry for that lack of clarity, it is the same microwave dish, the same beam being partitioned, part for,
Well, we're not there yet.
not there yet, but that's the point, that you don't need a second set of dishes and everything else. You're partitioning the existing microwave that's being built for the public safety radio.
Could you elaborate on how that gets separated out on the same dish and the timing factor of,
Well, that-
of how you do it?
Sure, that addresses the lady's question in the back, that the computers, the microwave radios that actually generate the energy, and it really comes down to the computers that run the microwave network are smart enough to segregate residential broadband from radio traffic. So that's really the extent of what, to answer the question, the computers are smart enough to do the job of both purposes over the same
The
dish.
computer's up there on the top of the tower on the dish?
They're in the
computer-
shelter. They're
Okay.
in the radio shelter. You'll have a rack of equipment, equipment that drives the radios, other equipment that drives the microwave, that all works together to make the network. One of those boxes is smart enough to know that, oh, I've got to send these packets, ones and zeros over here. Oh, here's an internet request, I got to send them over here. So it all happens, it's magic inside that box, inside the
So
shelter.
it's like your electric circuit breaker in your house,
Fair enough, sure.
is it?
Yes, ma'am.
Except it has intelligence.
Right,
It's
but
an
I mean,
intelligent circuit breaker.
so it knows that it needs to send this to here and this to there
Correct.
because you have all of them on.
You got it.
And if you buy one that had a smaller circuit breaker, or one that didn't take care of that in the beginning, you'd end up throwing out that box and buying a new one?
No.
I'm getting to the point
Sure.
where do we do it
Well, that's
when
inherent.
we're building
Yes.
it? And why do it then?
As long as it's given as a requirement to the microwave vendor, we want to make sure that our microwave infrastructure can be segregated, and most microwave technologies can. Alcatel, whom you're talking with, can. A handful of other microwave vendors, their technology can certainly do it. The point that, to specific answer to your question, Kitty, is as long as it's given as a requirement up front, we want to be able to do this down the road Just buy the right equipment that can do that segregation, traffic segregation, that's all. There's no upgrades a year or two from now.
Talk about the pricing issue.
Wait, sorry, Art has a question.
I didn't hear Alan was making a point about the key is, and I didn't hear the rest of what Alan said, and I wanted to hear what he had to say.
The key is to make sure the equipment up front has the ability to, I guess, channel the traffic or whatever. Segregate the traffic. This way we don't have to retrofit it or replace.
Well, that's why you're saying to contact the vendor
You want to be able to do that.
first, right? That's the first step.
That,
Riverside.
The microwave vendor.
well, the radio network that Alex and his folks are working on are considering, that's part of their project, and I'm not stepping into that. I'm sorry, perhaps, did you mean this one?
The requirement to the microwave vendor.
Oh, well, as those conversations are happening with the microwave vendor for your network, just make sure that's whoever's conducting those, and however they're happening, make sure that that's a requirement given to them.
Sean?
Just a question so I understand, this is
I can't hear him. I can't hear him.
Speak up, please.
This is basically 911 was designed for public safety, and then you're gonna chop off a little bit, put it out there. Does the New York State, like New York State troopers, have similar system, and is that are they capable of doing the same thing at the state level?
No. I'll defer that to Alex or whoever.
No.
Really.
That's the difference between a commonwealth and a state.
Right, state police are, I think, in the infancy of building out their microwave statewide, is my understanding. I mean, we have talked with them at length about, partnering with Sullivan County, but at this time they have no, they say they have no money for development in Sullivan County, so I think that they're just on the infancy of building it out.
But also, can you address, Alex, the fact that that New York State has a different model, a business model? We're working with a consortium of counties within the region, so it's being done through 911 in New York State as opposed to state police as it was done in Pennsylvania.
Well, I can't speak to the broadband initiative in New York State. I'm not very familiar with that. I know on the radio side, as we build out our public safety radio network, we are, part of our grant project that I reported on public safety. We're actually putting these microwave spurs into neighboring counties. So we're going to have, our microwave will now link with Delaware County's microwave, and ultimately probably Orange County's microwave. So we're looking to kind of, to the point of Frank's map there, we are looking at linking the counties together ultimately, and so someday, whether the state takes some initiative to partner with us, at least we have the network and the infrastructure in place for radio, and then obviously I think broadband's got some planning stages to go through, but I think that's certainly a logical next step.
There's a question I had about broadband versus cell. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Frank.
Frank, and whoever else knows the answer to this. Is broadband versus cell now one of the towers that's proposed in our area, not on the New York side, this is Pennsylvania side, is broadband only. And a tower within easy line of sight from that's proposed, that's going off, that Sullivan County is doing, is easy line of sight of that, and is emergency 911. And neither of those is addressing cellular service, phone service. Could you please explain the difference between I know the difference, but what I'm trying to say is many people are thinking that because they're getting broadband, they're also getting cell service.
Right, two separate topics.
Frank, Carlos from the National Park Service.
Oh.
That's the boss, don't look at me.
And Sean.
That bus came through awful quick.
Chain of command. I'll take care of that. That's enough questions for you.
You're probably working with PA statewide radio network, because I know that my bosses in engineering is talking with you about a shared tower, so hello.
Well, we're
bingo.
Doing a lot of talking
Yeah, but you
about
brought up a good point, the big difference between the state and the Commonwealth. There's a big difference.
But also the differences between the people who know that there are towers going in our area think that that means they're gonna have cell service,
For
and they are
15 years,
not.
we've thought,
Right.
tower equals cell phone coverage.
And so like, we're trying to promote, safety within the river corridor.
Yes, sir.
And so, cell towers is kind of like one of these things that, we've been dealing with just because of the scenic quality of the ridgetops. So here comes a tower, and we're like, all right, well, okay, well, this is gonna provide safety for bus drivers and people, so that they can't have cell service and now can call for help. Then we find out these towers are not capable of producing cell service, and the public and the people that live in the valleys, thinking they're gonna have cell, are supporting these towers when these towers aren't gonna help them at all. And matter of fact, they're gonna have a tower right in their picture window.
They're gonna have a tower in their picture window that is for 4G LTE data only.
Which they don't
Not
really
their
care
cell
about.
phone, which may have some duct tape on the back because they've been working for the last 6 years.
But that's not public safety broadband, we have to.
No, separate topic, that's a third separate topic.
Would you please elaborate somewhat from my knowledge? I'm back there in Willowemoc, which has Time Warner Cable, and I never had cell reception before. But I bought this, I want to say, funny little box that I was able to connect to my computer.
Yes.
That allows my cell reception. So,
Right.
and how does that work with hotspots with phones along the river corridor?
That's what you're describing is think of a hotspot for a cell phone, not data, but what it does is it probably costs you what, $200 or $240?
For the initial box,
For the little
you
box.
never had to pay any more.
Right. What that did is plug into your internet connection and basically translated your cell phone into digital and sent it over the internet and got it out to the cellular cell phone network. And that's a good device. That will help you use your cell phone in your residence, perhaps your neighbor, but not the block.
And what we're talking
Then what is a
about-
hotspot?
Hotspot is an internet, also known as Wi-Fi. A hotspot means you can bring your laptop into the coffee shop. I drove down Main Street and there's a coffee shop that says Cyber Cafe there. Cyber Cafe is a hotspot. You can bring your laptop, flip it open, and get on the internet over their wireless internet connection.
But it would not
Do
access the phone.
telephones, correct, separate device.
Okay.
You want more question, ma'am?
That relationship is exactly, that conversation is exactly the conversation that hundreds of people in our area are talking
And what
about.
do I
They're
tell
sure
them?
they're gonna get cell service.
Exactly.
They're sure, and they're not, and
Tower
that
today is not what a tower was 5 years ago.
Right.
But you're in a position, I'm not a fan of mandating a for-profit company to do something, but we're talking about public good. This is not unlike 1935 rural electrification, where, just because the farmer has a mile-long lane, it's not his fault, it was his great-grandfather's, so does he not get electricity? Sometimes this is where the government public-private partnership needs to have a little bit of, we're talking cellular coverage, we're not talking anything extraordinarily out of the norm here. This is basic. That conversation is what I'm gently trying to do with DCNR, who owns the ground on which Verizon wants to build these 6 towers that have fiber only, for data only.
What's DCNR? They're the
Conservation Natural Resources.
Oh, okay.
Now, would you then go into the piece that, like for art and grants, how building things together helps economically and to obtain grants?
I guess efficiency would be the one word that enabled us, Pennsylvania, to get our $29 million era stimulus grant. As we said, hey, the efficiency being, we've already built the towers, we've already built the shelters with fence and generators and that millions of dollars of infrastructure. Let's just reuse that for a different purpose. Let's take 71 of those instances and reuse them for a different purpose, leveraging what we've already built. So I guess efficiency and value is inherent in the grant process relative to what Alex is building and what you could do for civilian broadband. Yes?
And I think the bottom line to the question of the Sullivan County system is, so if we make it possible for internet providers to use part of those microwave, the space on the microwave, the county has the ability to make money back from the internet provider.
Not much.
Well, let me address that. We'll just address that outright. Inherent in the lack of rural broadband is the fact that an internet service provider doesn't have many customers, right? 10 here, 20 there. They spent many thousands of dollars getting these antennas up on towers that can, some can see through trees and some cannot. So there isn't a big revenue stream for them to begin with. So what we did in Pennsylvania is say, you know what, we recognize that fact. Now, thankfully, we're lucky those two ISPs are nonprofits. They don't have shareholders to worry about. That's the other inherent problem in rural broadband is you have high profit margins and you only have a small customer base, you're not going to sell it. So these two companies, nonprofits, they have 4 employees and 11 employees. So their profit margin necessarily is smaller. And what we in Pennsylvania said, the federal government gave us the money to build this anyway. We kicked in $5 million, the federal was 29, so a $34 million network. Let's share the risk right at the beginning. And let me back up a step. Let's share the risk in that you can connect to our network and put your antennas up on our towers. We won't charge any rent. As a matter of fact, if you don't sell $1 of internet next month, we're not going to charge you for that connection. When you sell $1 worth of internet, let's do a revenue share. And it's 80-20, not going to hide anything. So for every dollar they make, we get 20 cents. Again, their customer base is small. Their cost of the service, $35, $45 a month. We're not talking big dollars. Not having tower rent is key. Basic tower rent is $1,000. You don't even talk to them before $1,000 a month. That's probably $2,000 a month for any one, well, that whole installation. But the point is, thousands of dollars a month for a tower rent. A rural internet service provider is not going to pay that. Can't. Then, we said earlier, that $1,500 a month plug into the internet, there's another cost they have to bear. Now, that's their cost of doing business, and I can't affect that. But what I can do is help offset that with no tower rent and say, you know what, if you don't make anything, we're not going to charge it to transport over our network. The cost of transporting on our network is 20 cents out of $1 when you do sell it. And that's where I relied on the candor of the internet service providers, because I did 2 years ago, didn't know anything about this. And it was they who said, yeah, that's a fair number. And they're able to work within that. So is it going to generate some money? Yeah, I'll probably pay the electric bill, and a maintenance call, maintenance visit here or there, but I would encourage you not to view it as a revenue generator for the county. Look at it as your investment in the economic development of your county.
And that's the piece. That's the key to me. To
big
build this county is to have the road. If we don't have the road, they're not coming. It's kind of like the ball field. You build it, they will come. You know, so to me, having this ability is the key for our economic growth. And to have it all in one way, I think is a key factor. You know, and to know that there's potential grant money out there that will allow that build is another big piece, because we don't have the money. I mean, those are the other pieces of the key. Would you get into, you said something about putting one on top of a water tower. Would that expand your line of sight?
Yes.
Go further than the 8 miles?
Precisely.
How does that play in this?
And that's where an internet service provider would drive around. Take an internet service provider to come and actually look and see, relate their experience in rural whatever state, and relate it to your towns. As I drove by the high school, they're kind of up on a hill. Pick a building that's up on a hill. Maybe they would help the community and allow an antenna for free on their roof to broadcast to another half mile down the road as opposed to the initial 3. And that's where the experience, this is what's important. dare I say critical, to have not just any internet service provider, but a rural wireless internet service provider. It's got to be wireless and it's got to be rural, so you might as well get that experience right up front. Because it's key to be able to say, oh, we could use that school, we could use that, hey, that's a radio tower, I wonder if we could, I wonder if that'd help us. And those conversations, especially here, I'll refer to in the western part of the state, getting that internet signal that is on a tower that may not be line of sight, it may be, you know, down a valley and up over the next valley. Well, you know, there's a county tower. Clearfield, that's why I went to Clearfield. They have a 340-foot tower. It said, hey, we didn't know you were trying to do this. Why don't you use ours to relay down? And the internet service provider was there, and in fact, that's what they're going to do, to get down into another part of Clearfield.
So it extends the 8 miles, maybe further out, or gives a better...
It is like a vegetable garden. It takes watering and care to get it to grow and produce fruit, and that's not overnight. But you're definitely going to see growth, and it's exciting. But you need to know how to garden in the first place. Yes?
Why is it that a company would build a tower for broadband and not include cellular?
Why would, okay. They're not going to invest money if they don't have to. Whoever they are, generic cellular company is Inc. They have shareholders to attend to, so they have to look at their expenditure of monies relative to their cellular footprint. Is it worth their definition, an engineering stockholder definition of worth, expanding our cellular footprint, as opposed to our definition of worth it to expand their cellular footprint. They're a for-profit company, bottom line, they're going to install what they have to, period. I contend that there is a brand equity. What's the value of that Coke label? A lot. Well, how do you put a dollar figure on that? Well, I contended to Verizon in that meeting that their brand could benefit from the expansion of that cellular footprint, even if that didn't directly translate into increased cellular telephone customers.
Why give them permission to build a tower without some caveats that they do something that you want? And the state should have enough power to be able to say, you can't have, we're not gonna give you the documents you need to build a tower unless you do the following things or make this happen in this way.
But our case
And the
is
county
different,
as well.
because correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, we are using the grant funding, and therefore the county will be owning the towers.
Some of them are grant funded.
Some are grant funded and some
Some
we're
are being-
actually renting space on other privately owned towers.
Correct.
Darcy's point is well taken for the National Park Service folks who have some leverage over the construction of new towers.
Don't give them the permits
But
unless they give you what
that's
you
their
need.
decision relative to the community benefit and public safety benefit.
Well, part of that is the question too, we're gonna have a very fine tower in one of the communities that, not being an engineer, I can see a line of sight to, say, the Job Corps tower, to be able to serve the community that a company on the Pennsylvania side is claiming they're going to be serving for broadband.
Right.
But we could be the beneficiaries of that
There you go.
in our own town.
That's correct.
What should have happened is they had to go in front of the planning board to get approval. And the planning board could have said, listen, we want, in order for you to get this tower, we want some community benefit from it. And we want to have emergency services on. It's very common when the tower comes up. And that's when you have the hammer to get what you need. After it's approved, it's too late.
And once that horse is gone, you ain't getting her back. And those, let me guess, those conversations have already happened in Sullivan County, and the towers are already built, and there are no pending applications, are there? For cellular
Depends
providers?
on the community. No,
Right.
the tower's still going up.
Okay. So, very good point, and to what Darcy said too, that you need to know up front when there are new tower applications, hey, community benefit is here as well, not just internet because you have to. So hopefully this was clear and helpful.
Thank you very much,
Appreciate it,
Frank. I
and,
really appreciate you
all
coming
right.
and doing this.
3:20, thanks for the
I
hour.
wanted you to talk to one more
It's gonna be
point.
20 minutes.
I wanted to talk to one more point about the relative cost of these different items. So if you're buying a dish and capability, and this time it has additional capabilities, it may not even cost.
Installed in the electronics, and or you buy the appropriate electronics that you can segregate the traffic, then that answers the question. So there is no real cost per se to doing what we're talking about, to building a rural middle mile network. It's just inherent in the technology that's specified up front.
But if we don't do it up front, there would probably be a cost
To retrofit that equipment down the road,
and that cost would be
X times 9,
pretty large.
X.
Well, X is not $1.
We also would have to look to make sure that the grants that we've been getting will allow this private-public sector segregation.
Well, it doesn't have to happen now. It just has to be one more capability that the technology you're putting in is capable of. You don't have to implement it tomorrow.
I'm just saying it's still that I just say it's something we need to explore.
As a point of reference, that's very valuable. A noteworthy asterisk is we use bonds in Pennsylvania to construct the $640 million statewide radio network over since 1996. There were some questions about the conditional use of bonds and reselling. We actually do in Pennsylvania, again, we have 240 towers. We do we resell this vertical real estate in the space. Thank you. There was a legal question of, hey, your bond conditions, are you allowed to do that? And the answer was yes, after a lot of $400 an hour attorneys. But the answer was yes, and we can. But to your point, it's worth keeping in mind as a condition, potential condition. So.
It sounds great. I'm more concerned about my emergency services, my fire, police, and ambulance. I can live with my dial-up as long as I know they're going to get service first. After that, I'll get what I can get. But I want to make sure those services are taken care of first.
But I want to be clear on this, Frank. We're not saying that we wouldn't have those services.
Not at all.
We're saying that we're not going to have the computer of 1980. We're going to have the computer of 2013 that has more capability.
Right. This is not to detract or complicate anything that Alex and his folks are doing at all. This is simply to say this is another purpose that we want to consider. But please, Mr. Microwave Vendor, please consider this potential future purpose to what you're specifying and designing for us. The backbone of our public safety radio network. Absolutely, that comes first. This is just an additional pipe within the pipe, a bonus. And that's it.
One last comment.
Two.
I mean, just part of the equation here is another component is we've got a great 911 system, and the ambulance is going to come, fire engine is going to come. But if you're in a car down the side of a hill and you can't use your cell phone to dial up to get 911, then you're going to die. So 911 now has the capability of coming out there, but you can't call them because somehow our social system isn't making sure that companies are providing cell service to citizens.
That's accurate commentary.
Wow.
And the problem still lies similar to what we have now. This is all dependent on getting a vendor to provide, to go that last step to provide the service. If it's not profitable to them, unless we figure out a way to subsidize it through municipal money, they're not going to do this. Just
Right.
like the Time Warners of the frontiers of Sullivan County are not bringing that cable to your doorstep unless they can make money.
Right.
But I think what Frank was explaining, help me out on this, Frank, is that pipe, if we have the pipe throughout the county, we've got that middle mile already there, it's going to be a lot more conducive to get the guy to do the last mile.
No,
which
I-
is
Right.
what gets it to your house.
I'm just saying, we still have the problem, if it's not profitable, they're
Depending
not
upon
getting
where you
enough
are.
people,
Hence-
they're not doing it.
Hence the question
These are
marks.
much smaller companies, and
You're absolutely right.
their requirements for the ROI are very low,
You know it, we
certainly
know it.
compared to
We'll
the
get it.
big incumbents. And there are getting to be more and more of these rural WISPs. We've talked to a couple of them, we've had them here. So there's some potential we could find someone.
That's why I put question marks. I think it would be, if I could give a 2-cent commentary, it would be a worthy RFQ or RFP, RF whatever, to invest a little bit of money and to say, hey, rural WISPs, come to our county for a couple days and see what you got and give us your best guess as a business person who's experienced in this space, how our what our landscape looks like, literally and figuratively.
Is there also another layer of, does this have to be licensed through each municipality? Like, no? Like
Actually,
franchise, actually.
It's an independent business coming in to provide internet.
And also now there is very good quality wireless spectrum available called white space, which the FCC has determined is going to be available for these kinds of uses. So these companies come in, they don't have to buy their own spectrum, they can use this white space, and it gives them much better connectivity through trees and around things and things like that. So there are some things that have happened that have made this picture look better.
Well, I don't, I love the fact that everybody has paid attention and cares enough about this subject.
compelling and clear. Good.
Right,
Yes.
any public comment?
And I think it's now time for public comment, and perhaps we need to meet again to learn more when we move further. But public comment, yes, sir?
Yes.
Right, thank you, that was very informative.
I have some concerns. I'm all for emergency services and that. There's a good portion of the county here and in Pennsylvania that relies on panoramic and scenic views. Due to the competitive nature of Verizon and the cell tower industry, they seem to be popping up all over with the denigration of panoramic and the scenic value.
And I understand your concern, that's why we're looking at keeping it at this point in time on the already planned towers that are going in for the 911. Those have already passed and have been determined. It's not like we're looking to build a whole bunch of sticks and antennas
point.
all over the county.
Yep.
We're going to try to do this all on the ones that already are planned for the 911 emergency.
Good point.
So,
Okay.
yes?
I see this is being recorded, is that going to be posted and
Yes.
available? Yes?
Yes. It'll be live at youtube.com/communityfilmwatch.
And a couple others too.
There was another question, which I think Alex has answered. Can you repeat the question?
When are the towers expected to come in to be built?
Our anticipation would be to be building between now and probably September of next year, September 2014.
So they'll be finished by September?
We sure hope so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? Then I need a motion
Motion
to adjourn.
Okay, Ira,
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Frank. We
No, no, no,
appreciate
that-
what you've done.